The town gathered not to celebrate, but to laugh at a 19-year-old girl forced into a marriage she never chose. People whispered that she was too young, too poor, and too helpless to refuse. They believed she was being sold to a millionaire cowboy for money and status. She stood quietly in her wedding dress, her hands trembling, her eyes lowered, while cruel smiles followed her every step. No one noticed the fear in her face. No one cared about the tears she hid behind forced silence. The cowboy beside her said nothing. His calm expression made the crowd even more curious and judgmental. They thought they already knew the ending of this story, that a young girl trapped, a rich man showing power. But the air suddenly changed when the cowboy moved forward to present his wedding gift. He did not smile. He did not speak loudly. He simply revealed the truth behind the marriage. That I in that moment. Laughter vanished. Voices froze. And the entire town realized they had judged too quickly. What followed was not celebration, but shock, shame, and regret that would haunt them forever. She was only 19 when her life was decided by others, not by her own choice. She came from a poor family with no voice and no protection. Society cornered her until escape was impossible, and the only option left was marriage to a much older millionaire cowboy. People said she was lucky. They said money had saved her future. But no one saw the fear behind her quiet eyes or the pain she carried in silence. She did not dream of wealth. She dreamed of freedom. The town believed she had traded her youth for comfort, and they judged her without mercy. Whispers followed her everywhere, calling her weak and greedy. Her family stood helpless, and she stood alone, wearing a smile she did not feel. The cowboy remained distant and unreadable, adding to the mystery surrounding the marriage. No one understood why he chose her, and no one asked if she wanted this life. As the wedding approached, a heavy tension filled the air because deep down, everyone sensed this was not a love story, but something far more complicated and unexpected. As the wedding drew closer, the town's behavior grew colder and sharper, turning every step she took into a quiet punishment. People stared as she passed, not with kindness, but with hidden laughter and cruel curiosity. Some mocked her openly, while others whispered behind closed doors, calling her greedy for accepting the marriage and weak for not fighting back. They said she was lucky to escape poverty, yet none of them noticed how her hands shook or how her breath tightened whenever eyes followed her. No one asked what she felt inside. No one wondered why her smile never reached her eyes. Her fear was visible, but ignored, as if fear did not matter once money entered the story. Every market visit, every church bell, every shared glance reminded her that she no longer belonged to herself. The weight of judgment pressed heavier each day, slowly breaking her spirit. She learned to walk with her head down, not out of respect, but to avoid seeing the faces that enjoyed her discomfort. Children repeated words they heard from adults, turning mockery into laughter, while elders nodded in agreement, convinced they were right. Her nights became sleepless, filled with silent tears and unanswered questions. She wondered if anyone would ever know the truth behind her forced silence. The cowboy remained distant, watching everything without interruption. His quiet presence confused the town even more, feeding their assumptions. They believed his silence meant control and power, that he owned the situation and the girl standing beside him. But they were wrong in ways they could not imagine. She noticed his calm eyes often lingered on her pain, as if he understood more than he revealed. Yet he never spoke, never defended her, and never corrected the lies. That silence hurt almost as much as the town's cruelty. She felt trapped between judgment and uncertainty, unable to trust anyone, including the man she was about to marry. Each passing day made her feel smaller, as if her identity was slowly being erased. The town continued its celebration of gossip, never realizing they were pushing her closer to breaking. Her heart carried fear, confusion, and quiet strength she did not know she possessed. The air around the wedding felt tense and restless, like something unseen was waiting to surface. Every laugh sounded forced, every smile felt temporary, and every judgment carried consequences no one expected. The girl stood at the center of it all, humiliated yet silent, while fate prepared a moment that would soon challenge every cruel word spoken against her and force the town to face a truth they were not ready to accept. The cowboy stayed quiet as the tension thickened around them, never raising his voice or explaining his intentions, which only deepened the mystery surrounding him. He moved through the town with slow confidence, his posture steady, his expression unreadable. People watched him closely, searching for signs of pride or cruelty, but found only calm control. That calm unsettled them more than anger ever could. They assumed his silence meant ownership, that he had chosen a young bride to display power rather than affection. Whispers followed him wherever he went, painting him as a cold man who used wealth to command respect. Yet he never corrected their assumptions. He listened without reacting, as if their words carried no weight. His eyes noticed everything: the stares, the mockery, and the quiet suffering of the girl beside him. He saw how she flinched when laughter echoed too loudly, and how she grew tense when footsteps approached. Although he remained distant, there were moments when his gaze softened briefly, revealing awareness rather than indifference. She felt his presence without understanding it, uncertain whether it offered safety or another form of control. His silence created a wall that no one could cross, feeding the town's imagination and deepening their judgment. They believed they understood his motives, yet none of them had spoken to him long enough to learn the truth. He attended meetings and preparations without excitement or pride, handling everything with simple efficiency. That lack of celebration confused the townspeople further. Because they expected arrogance from a man with money, they expected dominance, but found restraint that in private moments. He watched the girl struggle under the weight of judgment, and something unspoken passed between them. She sensed he knew more than he shared, that his quiet nature was not emptiness but intention. Still, he gave no comfort in words, leaving her unsure of his role in her fate. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with questions neither dared to voice. Rumors spread. The town convinced itself that the story was clear. A rich man had claimed a poor girl, and nothing more mattered. They laughed behind his back, believing wealth had blinded him to compassion. They were wrong, but ignorance felt safer than curiosity. The cowboy continued observing, patient and deliberate, as if waiting for the right moment to act. That patience created suspense that no one could explain, only feel. The closer the wedding came, the stronger the sense of anticipation grew, as though calm waters hit a powerful current beneath the surface. The town mistook his quiet nature for cruelty, never realizing silence can also be a sign of control, planning, and purpose. They believed the mystery was simple, but the truth was far deeper, and when it finally emerged, it would challenge every assumption they had made about the quiet cowboy and the frightened young bride standing beside him. The wedding day arrived wrapped in a strange silence that pressed down on everyone present, as if the sky itself understood something the people did not. The air felt heavy, thick with tension and expectation. Smiles appeared on faces, but none of them felt real. Each one looked practiced, forced into place for tradition rather than joy. Whispers moved faster than footsteps, sharp and restless, cutting through the quiet like unseen blades. She stood at the center of the gathering, her heart racing beneath layers of fabric, her breath shallow as she tried to steady herself. Every sound felt louder than it should have: the rustle of clothes, the scrape of chairs, the low murmurs that followed her wherever she moved. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, measuring her, judging her, waiting to see how this story would end. No one expected happiness. They expected obedience. The cowboy stood beside her, still calm, still unreadable, as if the chaos around him existed in another world. His presence was steady, but distant, offering neither reassurance nor threat, only certainty. That certainty unsettled the crowd even more. They had come believing the ending was already written: a young bride bound to a powerful man, a simple conclusion to a story they thought they understood. The ceremony began, but the words felt hollow, floating through the space without warmth. She listened, but her mind drifted between fear and confusion, searching for meaning in every pause and glance. Her hands trembled slightly, yet she held them together, refusing to let the town see how close she was to breaking. The cowboy spoke his vows evenly, without pride or emotion, which made people exchange uneasy looks. They expected confidence or control, but his voice carried restraint. She answered when it was her turn, her voice quiet but steady: holding strength she did not know she had. The tension in the room tightened with each passing moment, as if everyone sensed something was coming but could not name it. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment until discomfort replaced curiosity. She felt sweat gather at her palms, her heart pounding against her ribs. While her thoughts raced toward an unknown future, the cowboy glanced at her briefly, not with ownership, but with awareness, as if reminding her to stay present. That single glance shifted something inside her. Though she could not explain why's, the final words approached. The crowd held its breath, convinced this was the last step before silence returned to normal life. They believed nothing unexpected could happen now, that fate had already sealed its choice. Yet beneath the forced smiles and sharp whispers, an unspoken tension waited patiently, ready to break through the moment the ceremony ended and reveal a truth no one in the town was prepared to face. The ceremony concluded, and the final words faded into uneasy silence. The cowboy took a slow step forward, breaking the stillness in a way that instantly drew every eye toward him. He did not raise his voice or smile for attention, but his movement alone commanded the room. The crowd leaned in, expecting gold, jewels, or some grand display of wealth meant to prove power. He reached for a simple folder held carefully in his hands, and the contrast confused everyone. She looked at him with uncertainty, her heart pounding harder than before. Unsure what this moment would bring, he placed the folder gently into her hands and spoke calmly, his words clear and steady, explaining that this was his wedding gift. The room grew quieter with each sentence, as confusion turned into shock. The documents inside were not symbols of ownership, but freedom. They revealed that she was not bound as property, but protected by choice. He had arranged legal independence, financial security in her name, and full control over her future decisions. Her eyes widened as understanding settled in, and her breath caught as emotion rushed through her chest. The town froze, unable to process what they were witnessing. Whispers died instantly, as if sound itself had been taken away. She felt her knees weaken, but held herself steady, tears gathering as relief replaced fear. The cowboy continued speaking, explaining that the marriage was never meant to trap her, but to shield her from those who cornered her life. He had used his position not to control, but to protect, ensuring she would never be forced again. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, faces pale with realization. They had judged without knowing. They had mocked without understanding. He handed her the final paper, granting her the right to leave whenever she wished, with no conditions attached. That single gesture shattered every belief the town held about him and about her. The silence became heavy with shame. She clutched the folder tightly, feeling strength return to her body for the first time in months. The cowboy stepped back, allowing her space, allowing her choice. His calm expression remained unchanged, but his intention was now cleared. He was not claiming a bride, but restoring a future. The town stood motionless, unable to meet her eyes. Children stopped fidgeting, elders lowered their heads, and proud voices found nothing left to say. In that moment, she was no longer a girl being watched, but a woman being respected. The gift did not sparkle or shine, yet it carried more power than gold ever could. It exposed the cruelty of assumptions and the weight of silent kindness. Emotion filled the air. She realized this single act had changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone who had believed her story was already written. The truth settled over the gathering like a sudden storm, quiet yet powerful, leaving no space for denial or escape. Her tears continued to fall, but they no longer carried fear or shame. They carried relief, release, and the weight of pain finally lifting from her chest. She held the documents close, as if they were proof that she could breathe again. The crowd stood frozen, faces drained of color, unable to look away yet unable to speak. Each person felt the sharp sting of realization as their past words echoed back at them. They remembered the laughter, the whispers, and the cruel assumptions they had shared so freely. Now those same judgments felt heavy and unforgivable. Shame replaced confidence, settling deep in their expressions. Some lowered their eyes, others stared at the ground, while a few swallowed hard, trying to process the truth they had ignored for so long. No one dared to speak. The cowboy remained steady, allowing silence to do what words never could. His calm presence made the moment even stronger. Because it forced the town to face itself without distraction, she felt a quiet strength rise within her, as if her spine straightened on its own. She was no longer standing as a girl surrounded by judgment, but as someone finally seen for who she was. The weight that once pressed her shoulders eased, and her breathing slowed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, each movement filled with regret. They had mistaken kindness for control and silence for cruelty. Now they understood that their assumptions had caused real pain. The truth had not been announced loudly or dramatically, yet it struck harder than any accusation ever could. Parents glanced at their children, realizing the example they had set. Elders felt their authority crumble as wisdom turned into guilt. No applause followed, no celebration began. There was only silence, thick and unavoidable. She looked around and saw faces she had feared now filled with apology they could not voice. The cowboy finally stepped back beside her, not as an owner, but as someone who had given her choice. That simple act changed how everyone saw them both. The town had believed wealth was the center of the story, but they were wrong. The center was dignity, respect, and the cost of careless judgment. She felt something unfamiliar yet comforting settle in her heart, a sense of control over her own life. The silence stretched on, because no one knew how to respond to truth once it stood fully revealed. They had nothing left to defend, no excuses to hide behind. What remained was regret and the understanding that words spoken in ignorance could wound deeply. That as the moment passed, the town stood transformed, not by noise or confrontation, but by the quiet power of truth that forced them to confront their own cruelty and left them forever changed. She stood tall for the first time in months, feeling a freedom that money could never buy. Her heart swelled with dignity, her tears now of triumph rather than fear. The cowboy's calm eyes met hers, not with pride, but with a quiet strength that spoke louder than any wealth could. He had shown her that true power was not in riches or control, but in kindness, patience, and respect. Everyone in the town watched silently, realizing their cruelty had blinded them to the truth, that assumptions and gossip could never replace understanding. They had judged, they had mocked, they had whispered, but none of it mattered anymore, because she now held her life in her own hands. The crowd could only watch in stunned silence as she smiled genuinely for the first time, shedding the weight of fear and shame. The cowboy's gift had changed more than her life. It had shattered illusions, exposed hearts, and left a lesson burned forever into the memory of everyone present. That respect and compassion are the greatest riches one can ever possess.